Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever the time of day you are listening to us here at Dr. Rob's Spirits in the Supernatural. I want to welcome you to the show this evening. Tonight's topic is an eyewitness of Bigfoot. He lives about an hour north of Houston. His name is Thomas Hughes. He also has a talk show and has had on numerous guests and has a new perspective on the phenomenon that we know as Bigfoot. And so we look forward to having him on the show this evening. I also have a very good friend of mine, Robert Farron, who's going to be on with us at 7:15. So I encourage you to stay tuned for that call. Hey, Eddie, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, Rob. Hi, listeners. Good evening. Everything's well here in Miami.
Day 2 and no April. How are you holding up, my friend?
Oh, everything's well. You know, got in touch with her. She's on some camp here in Washington. She's going to stay there for about 12 days and then go overseas, go to Afghanistan.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to really, thank her for her service to our country, and we'll be hearing from her. I'm sure she will call in through Skype and talk to us on air at some point during the next few months. And
Absolutely.
So, what do you think of Bigfoot? I know that you have a lot of fascinations with the supernatural world, as I do, and the paranormal. And so, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot?
The Bigfoot is a fascinating phenomenon. I ran into some guy in the mid-'90s that was up in Flagstaff. I was on my way to Sedona, and this taxi cab guy had encountered the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, and he didn't get a visual sighting. It was rather like he heard it, and he smelled it because it was this. And, this really, danger, he had told me. It's I believe it's, could it be the missing link? I don't know, but it's a fascinating story nonetheless.
I agree with that. I mean, I've had on a few guests so far who have, one of my guests, Eric Smith, I was just speaking to him and told him to listen to tonight's show because I consider him one of the experts in my area of Bigfoot. And he actually has a cast of Bigfoot that was given to him by one of his relatives who is one of the Bigfoot experts in the world, also a UFO expert. And so he, passed this on to him while he was still alive, which I have been very fortunate to be in its presence on numerous occasions and have, really, experienced it on a first-hand basis. So, I know that a lot of our listeners, don't have the ability to, have that go on, but we have been very fortunate to, be able to, see it live in person. So it's very, very cool experience when you actually get to see something that you've only heard about, on TV or in the radio. And so, you were telling me you were listening to some of our archive shows. Max the Crystal Skull is another example of some really cool stuff that we've been able to do here on the show. And, being able to go and see one of the actual crystal skulls that, is real. A lot of people have had experience with some of the crystal skulls that are man-made, but this one's been, tested, and it's been on the History Channel and several other, popular channels. And so it's been kind of a great situation to be able to go out to some of these, places and visit them. We had another show that we did recently on the Coral Castle down in Miami. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to go there yet, but it's kind of one of those off the beaten path, sites. It's kind of like the big ball of twine, but it was really, a cool experience because, we were able to see all the architectural designs and, all the symbols that, the designer had created in it, and, there was moon and stars and all these other types of phenomenon there, and I actually was able to stand in the ley lines and experience a lot of phenomenon there as well. I mean, we they had one guide in front of me, one guy behind me, and we stood right in the center where east meets west. And I actually, was able to fall forward without even knowing what they wanted me to do. They're just like, were wanting to listen to, in case I fell backwards or fell forward too hard, they were there to catch me. So it was really a really neat, cool experience. I'm glad that to do our show about that. We've also had a lot of other, interesting shows. Recently we did UFO Week, and those shows were, out there for the public to hear some eyewitness accounts. In fact, you were one of the ones that we interviewed during that week, and we became such great friends that I invited you to come on and help me out temporarily until we can find a permanent co-host to replace Adrian. I actually spoke to him today, and he's doing really well. He wanted to tell everyone hi, and so we wish him the best in his endeavors, and it's something that he needs to go do right now, so maybe in the future he may come back to us, and he's always welcome. He's part of the family, of course. So we
awesome
to, his return, and I know that you're a good friend with him as well, and so we definitely miss him, and we definitely can't wait for him to get back from his adventure and tell us all about it for sure. Well, we do have our guest, Thomas Hughes, who is now on the line, and we're going to go to Thomas, and he's going to tell us about his experiences there in Texas. And Thomas, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Sure can.
Eric, can you speak so that he can make sure he can hear you perfect? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you, Eric.
All right, super. I just want to make sure everybody is, sometimes we have some technical difficulties with patching everybody in, and since I'm up here in Orlando where it's cold, and where are you calling in from today, Thomas?
Oh, I'm calling in from Texas, about an hour north of Houston.
Okay. So how's the weather there?
Oh, it's nice and cold. It was 21 degrees when I woke up this morning, so...
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I'm complaining about 50.
Yeah.
I've been bundled up for days. I feel like I'm in the Arctic, but I know that it's only 50 degrees outside, but it's been rainy, and when it rains in Florida, it's a little colder. Living close to the coast, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
One of the benefits of living near the water. Well, let's get to your story. Can you give me a little bit of background about yourself?
Well, I'm 6 feet 7 inches tall. My family has 900 acres of land down the road here from me. And I'd always seen things in the woods that raised question marks and never could find an answer for it. And, back in 2008, I was done. I was ready to go. And I just closed my eyes and let it be known to whoever was listening that I was done and ready to go. And they just needed to give me a reason to, wake up every day because I was done. And so it was about 2 months later that I was walking down a dirt road in the woods out of my family's place, and that's when I saw the Sasquatch female about 50 feet away from me. So, and it just kind of went from there.
Wow.
I've seen one that leaves a 21-inch footprint. I saw him from about 50 yards away, and I know he's been very close to me at night when I only had the full moon to see by. So, I've left food items for them in the woods before, and had them leave, the upper half of a turtle shell the first time I left something. The next time they left me 4 wild turkey feathers. Turkeys, I know they're around, but I've never really seen one. I've heard them before, but I've never seen one because they're very uncanny at not being seen if they don't want to. So
right.
I was, just fascinating that they found or got turkey feathers and left them for me in the woods, right where I left the food at, in fact.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, I think it's kind of like an exchange there. You leave food and they leave something of value to them, and who knows what really the value of the turkey feather is, to those creatures, could be like gold to them. They don't have our monetary system, obviously, so, it had to be something of great value, I'm sure.
Yeah, it may have just been a way of saying thank you.
Exactly.
The American Indians considered them to be neighbors. Depending on the tribe you talk to, some tribes had good experiences with them. Like my tribe, the Cherokee, they used to share their burial grounds with the what I call the hairy folks, the Sasquatch people. If you put Bigfoot and Cherokee Hill in Google, you'll find a story of a man that went out, I believe it was in 2003, with a Cherokee elder there in Tennessee, and saw ancient, a very old Cherokee burial ground, and he was allowed to examine a leg bone that went from from your ankle to your knee, that part of the leg bone that was 3 feet in length. That's, longer than most people's entire leg, and that's just one leg bone.
Wow.
So, some tribes didn't have such good dealings with them, but some tribes did. The Cherokee people viewed them as neighbors, much the same way Aborigines viewed the Yowie as a neighbor over in Australia. They know they're around, they share the land with them, and they leave it at that. They don't make a big deal out of it, because to them it's not a big deal. And so I had 15 people here in October, some from different states, some from the local area, and every one of them had some kind of Sasquatch experience while they were here, either seeing them or having something thrown in their direction that landed near them and nobody else is around, or hearing them talk to each other. The young woman and her boyfriend that were complete skeptics heard two males talking to each other just 50 feet from them as they laid out in the field watching the stars, and they left the next morning because they thought I was on drugs or something, but they quickly discovered that they're very real and they're very, very much here. They could talk to each other.
I'm sorry, when you say talk, you mean like grunts or literally like talking, like humans?
Oh, no, they verbalize. You can go to...
Oh, you do?
Yeah, you can go to SierraSounds.com, and Ron Moorhead recorded them speaking to each other back in 1974, and he got it on tape. They speak a mixture of language between Native American languages, sometimes English, sometimes their own language, but they do speak a language.
Wow.
So they have the ability, they're multilingual then, between Native American and English?
Certainly. There are reports from people in Quebec, Canada, of hearing them speak French. So they pick up the language that's in the area. And they have their own language as well. So it just depends. It's like if you were to go to Mexico, you might not learn how to speak Spanish, but you would pick up certain words so that you could survive in that area in Mexico. So it's the same way. They pick up certain words of the language that they can verbalize and try and get their point across. But in that, if you put Bigfoot speech in YouTube, you'll find a video posted there with some pictures. You might be able to see them, you might not. That's some of the hairy folks that have been taken. But you'll hear the female sing out in a very sing-song fashion, "I want some of that." And what she's referring to is Ron and Leo had an elk strung up on a tree that they were butchering because they had killed it on the way into camp, and these Sasquatch people were hungry, and they just wanted to share in the meat, the food, and they were trying to convey that to Ron and Leo, but of course they're humans being confronted by, a 9-foot-tall hairy man and his woman and their kid, and they don't know what to do. They're beside themselves with fear at this point because they're dealing with something much bigger than they are. So they couldn't understand the English that was being spoken to them. But yeah, that's kind of what went on.
You're awesome.
Go ahead.
You're awesome, dude. You are awesome.
Fascinating.
When we come back from our break, we are definitely going to have to hear more of your stories. I know in our pre-interview you spoke to me about being struck by lightning, and so I look forward to hearing about that. And also, you have the ability to talk to autistic children, and so we definitely want to hear that as well. So when we come back from our break, we'll have more from Thomas Hughes. You too. Eddie, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Hold on one second, okay? I'm going to go to Thomas. He's been patiently waiting in between interviews. Thomas, are you with us?
I am.
All right. Thank you so much for waiting for... I've been excited to talk to Robert all day, and so with this 90-day challenge that we're, offering our listeners. We are, trying to get as much as we can out there, not only about, the spirits and the supernatural, but also mind, body, and spirit. And this kind of goes along with our theme here at the show, is to not only help people, with their minds and their spirits, but also their bodies. And so it kind of, goes along with that. So we'll be speaking to them later about that. But we were getting back to you and your story with us this evening. Prior to the show, you had mentioned to me that you had been struck by lightning. Now, do you think that can you tell us about that? And the second question is, can you tell us how that might have affected your ability to, attract these hairy people, as you call them?
Well, I don't know that being struck by lightning had anything to do with that. I had a dream about being struck by lightning 2 weeks prior to it actually happening. That was almost identical to what happened in real life. The only difference is I was struck outside the house, and I don't know if I lived or not. I don't think I did. In reality, I was sitting on my bed in the house after I'd run inside to get out of the rain. I was sitting on the end of my bed trying to decide which blockbuster video to watch, because back then we were still on VHS days. So I was sitting there trying to decide which video to watch, and my antenna wire for my ham radio setup was just laying inside the window. And so it hit the antenna outside, came down the antenna wire, and hit me in the foot and threw me across the room. So that was my lightning experience. It felt like somebody hitting me in the bottom of my foot with a 2x4 as hard as they could.
Were you knocked
unconscious
at that point, or did you, have your consciousness about you?
Well, I had been learning about, I've been having experiences already and learning about energy flows and how to work within the energy, and figuring out the energetic being I was within the consciousness of being in a physical body. So I'd already known about certain things, and I looked at that as kind of a wake-up call. It's just like when I was 18 years old, a tornado touched down 100 feet away from me, just across the street where there were no houses built yet, and I stood there in the garage and watched the whole thing, wondering if I was going to be sucked out of the garage and taken up in the storm and deposited miles away or something. But luckily all it did was pull three pine trees out of the ground and lay them over on their side, and then it went away. But yeah, that was another experience I had when I was 18. I got struck by lightning 4 years later when I was 22, so it's been a roller coaster ride for me at times, back and forth, just trying to be fat, dumb, and happy. That's been my main goal, and it never has quite worked out that way. So
you've had a lot of, paranormal, I wouldn't even call them paranormal, but just, a lot of experiences that, lead you to the paranormal world, I think.
Well, sure, and if you look at the definition of paranormal, it's, experiences that defy normal explanation or explanation by scientists. So the experiences I had certainly defy logical explanation or scientific explanation. I mean, I'm sure you could wrap one around it, but how did I get struck by lightning and take no physical damage from it whatsoever? That's a question in itself. Because I didn't take any physical damage, didn't have to go to the hospital, nothing. I just got thrown across the room.
Wow.
That's quite a story.
Well, I think that, with that experience and the tornado experience, and then, we were talking earlier today about, how spiritual people seem to be more attracted to the creatures than other people. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know that you've interviewed a lot of guests over the last, few years, on this subject.
Well, sure, and I had a guest on my own show, Chief Phil Lane Jr. of the Dakota Minnetonka. He spent time at the Haskell School for Indians, boarding school in Kansas. And so what he learned, or what scientists learned, is that Europeans tend to be very left-brained. That's where your logic and your deductive reasoning, that sort of stuff, is placed at. And indigenous people here in this country and in other parts of the world tend to be very right-brained. And, of course, there's a cross-connection there because the right brain controls the left side of your body and the left brain controls the right side of your body. And so when you begin to look at spirituality, that centers mostly in the right side of your brain. And so that's why indigenous people the world over have been more in tune with spiritual things that occur because they're more right brain than left brain. And that's why that sort of thing occurs. The dogma that we all go by today in this country demands that everybody be very left-brained. And they call it logical, irrational thinking. You have to think about those words for a moment because usually English words have two words that usually got condensed into one word at some point in history. But logical is logic all, and rational is ration all. So ration all your thought to what makes sense or is acceptable, and then put it in a box called logic. Logic all thinking into a box instead of really letting your instincts from the right side of your brain take over and understand what's really going on. Does that make sense? Did I lose you?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It really does.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eddie.
No, I said it makes a whole lot of sense. That, you know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
yep.
We can hear you fine.
All right. Okay. Cool.
You have a good connection.
So there's no rational or logical experience to explain why I was able to communicate telepathically with autistic children last year. And it was amazing even to me, but I had adult women on the phone that were gasping in surprise saying, "How do you know this?" And I'm like, "I don't know anything. I keep telling you I'm just repeating what's being told to me by these children."
Wow. So you have so you're using telepathic gifts to communicate with autistic children, and how is that working? I mean, is it like they can have conversations with you in your head, or how exactly does it work?
Sure. When you enjoy that kind of mind speak is what I call it, there's a lot of information that comes through at once. Usually it's not just words. Sometimes it's words, and it's not always words. You get images or impressions. You always get emotions that go with it, but you get the full meaning of what's being conveyed to you, which we can't do through verbal language. And so two of the children that I worked with are in Oregon, and another one is in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm sitting down here in Texas, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I don't know how to explain this. This is certainly paranormal because there's no logical or rational explanation for this. Right. So, you know, that I had adult women on the phone that were validating for me right away.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what it's called. It's called the gift of empathy, and that allows you to feel people's emotions. That can allow you to hear their thoughts. And, you know, because of your attunement is, you know, towards the autistic children, mine is, I also have that same gift. You know, not only do I, you know, tap into my, listeners who call in for readings, but I can also tap into the vibrations of their children and their husbands and their relatives, and, you know, and it works the same principle. So I just want to let you know that, you know, not only can you probably speak to autistic children, but you probably also have the ability to speak to animals, and that might be one of the reasons why, you know, Bigfoot, you know, creatures or hairy people, as you call them, you know, have that same telepathic gift, and so they can kind of hear your thoughts just as much as you can hear theirs.
Well, I would agree with you to a point on some of that, but empathy alone does not explain why the 11-year-old autistic girl was able to shove geometric shapes and equations into my head.
Right. Well, no, I'm not doubting your telepathy. I'm not doubting the telepathy. I'm just
I'm just saying. I know you're not doubting it. I'm just saying that the explanation does not fully explain what I experienced. Right. I don't know if we have a vernacular that fully explains everything I've experienced. As far as Sasquatch being animals, yes, they are, but most humans have to realize that we're animals as well, and Dr. Melba Ketchum's work in using human markers for DNA testing, and she's found it's going through peer review right now, and she's found that the Sasquatch people are 0.4 to 0.5% different from us. So that's 99.5% identical to us.
Wow.
There's no other
primate
on the planet that
I have my friend Eric
matches that.
Smith on the line. It might be interesting to speak to him at this point. Eric, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hey, you're live on air with us here at Dr. Rob Spirits in the Supernatural. I know that you have a lot of experiences with Bigfoot, and so I thought you might want to ask Thomas here a question or two, some things that you heard tonight, because I know you've been listening. I've seen you on the switchboard, so.
I find it intriguing with the. I followed some of this with the speech patterns of correlating with some of the Native American speech, and I find that fascinating. And I've heard some of the dialects actually before, in which you could kind of. It almost sounded like some sounded almost like gibberish, and then some words were basically brought back to almost a Native American speech, and I find that very fascinating in that respect. Which, again, many Native Americans had stories regarding the Sasquatch and Bigfoot.
Exactly. Thomas, you live in Texas, and Eric had an experience here in the state of Florida, not too far from where I am right now. And, some of the stories that you were describing at the beginning of the hour, Eric had some similar experiences. And so I think that, there's some validity to what you both are saying, because you don't live in the same part of the country, but yet you have, some very similar, experiences. So.
Well, what I can say is that I don't expect anybody to believe me. And what I'll say about belief is what occurs in the absence of evidence. And so if people want to know, because it's more important to know than believe, it's not that hard to go out there and have an experience with the Sasquatch. But you have to respect them as a type of people. You have to respect the fact that they're in their home, and you most importantly have to respect that it's their choice if they come around, not yours. And then you might be getting somewhere. But that's how I went out the door. Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall were heroes of mine because they've done primate research with primates that can easily kill humans. So I realized those facts, I realized the respect that was needed, and that's how I went out the door, and I was completely shocked to start having the experiences that I did have.
How many experiences did you say you've had over the years?
I have seen them in the daylight 9 different times. I've had them come close to me at night times, more times than I can count, making noise that could not be mistaken for anything else. When you're on 900 acres of private land and there's no other humans around, it's difficult to draw any other conclusion when you hear rocks being clacked together just 40 feet away from you at nighttime. So there's certain experiences that you just have to experience it yourself to understand what I'm talking about. There's just no other. There's no vernacular that can truly explain some of the experiences that I've had. But the 15 people that were here in October of last year, they all had their own experiences, and I didn't have to say anything to them. In fact, they were asking me why I looked so bored, and I kept telling them, this is an old hat for me. I've been down this road for the last 2 years or so, I'm having more enjoyment watching the Kodak moments on your face than I am anything that's going on.
How tall were they?
The one that leaves a 21-inch footprint, I would say he's probably close to 11 feet tall, just guessing.
Wow.
You didn't describe him to us. Could you describe what you saw exactly? I mean, as best you can.
Well, the female is about my height, which is 6.5 feet tall. And I could tell that she was a female because she had small but perky breasts on her front. She had very big legs, very muscular legs, and she was close enough to where I could see individual stomach muscles. In other words, I could see her six-pack through the hair on the front of her body. That's how close she was to me when I saw her briefly. And so that's the smallest one I've seen, by the way. I've seen one juvenile.
It's still
Take
pretty
it back.
big. I mean, if I was in the middle of nowhere and I came across something like that, I think I'd be frightened.
I was never scared. See, I've got multiple sclerosis nowadays, so I can't run anymore. I haven't been able to run for several years, so it never dawned on me to be scared. And if they meant me any harm, I would be a greasy spot in the woods already.
Right.
As far as the smallest one I've ever seen, I take it back on the female. I've seen a juvenile that was about 4.5 feet tall, and he came out in broad daylight because he knew I was walking around in the place, and I heard him crashing through the woods. And what I can say for that is their kids are just like ours. Kids will be kids. And so the adults were asleep during the middle of the day like that, and so he took the opportunity to run out and see me. He probably got scolded for it or chastised for it later on by the adults of the clan or the family.
How many people are out there on this 900 acres? How many of the hairy people are out there?
Well, I don't know if they're right on my family's place, but they come through that area, and I would say it's a small family that I'm dealing with, probably 5 or 6 that I'm dealing with. There's a tribe that I deal with off to another direction from me. And there's probably about 35 or 40 in that clan that I go and spend time with once in a while. It's a different clan.
Do you gather evidence, like clumps of hairs and so on, or?
No. I started taking photographs, and I got some photographs when I first started, but, everybody will call them blob squatches. But for me, what defines a photograph, and I know something's there, is when I can see the white of the eye, the color of the eye, and the pupil of the eye. Then I've got something that really outlines it for me. But it wasn't until I put the camera down, put it away, that they really started coming around me more often, because they didn't trust the camera. They didn't know what it was. And naturally, if you don't know what something is, you're going to be a little leery of it. And so I put the camera away, and that's when I started having more interactions with them.
Now, you call them the hairy people. What color is the hair that's on the body?
No, the female is a chestnut color. That's what I would, closest thing I could find to it. The male that I saw is very interesting. He has I almost want to call it an orangutan orange, but it's more, there's red to the hair. There's a red tint or hue to the hair as well. So I would say a bright red on him. And what's interesting, on his back, he has a black stripe on his back that goes from the right side of the body to the left side in a diagonal fashion. And he's big. He says to jump, and I say, how high? So,
yes, sir.
So
Eric, you're still with us, right?
Yes, I am.
And your experience was similar to that. What color was the creature that you saw?
It was a reddish-brown hair. And what I'm intrigued with, how would you describe the face?
Well, the female I saw, aside from the hair, looking at the face, she looked just as human as you and I. It wouldn't surprise me to go to a mall in the city of Houston and see a female or a human woman that looks just like her. She had a very angular chin, very slender nose, and, she had big eyes. Not terribly big, not disproportionate or anything, but she had big eyes. But she had an otherwise average-looking face. It didn't look mongoloid or apish or anything like that. Now, the male I've seen, a couple of males that I've seen, do tend to look a little more mongoloid or maybe even apish at times. But, you can go to the mall again. You can go to the mall and see people who look like apes or gorillas because, let's face it, there's some people out there that just look like they don't belong, right? So
that's true.
Oh.
That is not nice, but true. Hey, we have a caller from the 831 area code. I just want to check in with the caller and see if they have any questions for Thomas. Hello, caller.
Hi, this is Tina. How you doing, Thomas?
Hi, Tina. How are you?
Where are you calling from?
I'm doing good. I'm calling from California, and just listening in to this evening's show. And Thomas has a lot of experience and knowledge with the furry folks. And I'm happy to call him a friend. Just listening in, and thank you for sharing the information that you're sharing. It needs to be shared in my perspective, and really enjoying the show.
Well, I appreciate you calling into the show. Do you have any experiences that you want to share with us? Have you been out to the property, or have you been with Thomas on one of these expeditions?
No, I haven't. But I have a lot of interest in the metaphysical realm, and due to my own personal experiences, I've learned to really keep my mind open, and have found a lot of answers just listening to people share, just with piecing together different experiences and encounters that I've had on the metaphysical realm, so to speak. So I just think it's fascinating, and I'm really glad you guys are talking about it and bringing a lot of important people who've dedicated their lives to research, study, you name it, and just glad that I can benefit from all of the information that's being shared. So thank you guys very much.
Oh, you're so welcome, and I know that a lot of listeners out there are just as excited about having Thomas on as I am.
Oh, yes. I was like,
it's
right
a validation
on.
point, when you have people that can tell stories to you from eyewitness accounts, it gives more credibility not only to what they've seen, but also from what they've read. And I think that, as we, progress in the months, I'm never going to let go of the subject. It's been something that I've, been interested in since a kid. And so, now that I'm 41 almost, it still intrigues me. So I thank you so much for calling in this evening. I do want to remind the callers that Friday tomorrow is our call-in show. If you'd like to call in to Universe is Calling, are you listening? Call into 310-861-2343. That's 310-861-2343. Eddie, I know you're still with us. Did you have any questions for Thomas or Eric or Tina before I close the show?
No, overall, very fascinating, incredible, well explained. I guess I got all my answers so far, so thanks. I appreciate it.
No problem. Hey, Thomas, do you have any other stories that you want to share with us this evening?
Well, I think the only thing that's really blown me out of the water, so to speak, because most things don't have much of an impact on me. Even when I see the Sasquatch, when I first started seeing them, it just had me going after it harder. But in 2009, I was sitting in a Pizza Hut, and the 4-year-old son of a waitress I know there was sitting next to me, and I started to get up to get another plate of food, and he put his hand on my forearm, and he looked at me with a big smile on his face. And you got to understand, this kid didn't speak very good English because he's 4 years old, and he speaks in 4-year-old gibberish. And so he looks at me with a big smile on his face, and he says in perfect English, "I knew you when you were smaller than I am now." I almost fell out of the chair.
Wow.
But then I came home and grabbed an old photograph from 1918 of my grandmother's brother. And it's like he's almost a spitting image of this kid that I was sitting next to at Pizza Hut here in the town I live in. So...
Well, we've had shows on past lives, and I actually do past life regression. So, in India, that's quite common, for relatives to stay within, the clan. And, someone passes and a few generations later, even the same next generation, they come back in as the uncle or the brother or the sister or the mother, of the next generation. So, that's something that's quite common, not necessarily here in the U.S., but elsewhere. I had a friend named Michael who's from England, and he had a phone call. I was with him at his house, and apparently his friends had been in an estate sale, which is outside of London, about 2 hours, and they asked him if he was related to the owner of the estate, because when they went in, those big mantle, portraits that were done back in the 1800s, it's a spitting image of him. And they actually sent it to him to the States, and he actually has it hanging over his mantle, and everybody thinks that he had it commissioned for himself, but it's really a couple hundred years old. And he is actually from England, so, who knows? Maybe he was the Earl, that had passed, and, now he's living in America. So, there's a lot of, different coincidences in my life along those same lines. I lived in Europe, and the first neighborhood I lived in, I felt like I had been there before, and, everywhere I turned, it was like I was home. So, there's a lot of, I don't think any coincidences there. I think it's just, a matter of fate bringing you back to where you are. Hey, Eric, do you want to make any last comments?
No, this has been a treat and absolutely fascinating. I hope to hear you again on one of Dr. Rob's shows, and all the shows are a real treat.
Definitely. Thomas, can you give us the name of your show and what time it's on so that our listeners can tune in?
Yes, the name of my show is Sasquatch and Spirituality. Is typically on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Central, but here lately I've been doing 3 and 4 shows a week because I've had so many guests lining up to be on my show as well. So, but you can go to Sasquatch and Spirituality and see the show schedule, and you can also listen to the archives. I've been doing the show for about a year and a half now. So,
very awesome, very awesome. And do you have a website if the viewers want to, or the listeners want to contact you?
I don't, but again, they can go to my show page here on BTR and send me a message, I'll be happy to get back to them, so,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to having you on future shows, and I just want to thank everybody for listening this evening, this morning, this afternoon, whatever time of day that you are tuning into Dr. Rob's Spirits and the Supernatural.